For those that have never heard about Statamic, this is going to be a bit of a deep dive crash course to get you up and running. When you start working with Statamic, it can throw a lot of different ideas at you very, very quickly and can be a little bit overwhelming. And this is designed to try to get you started, get you the tools that you need to help you start building straight away. So first of all, what is Statamic besides just being a content management system? First of all, it's about static and dynamic. So static files, but presented in a dynamic way. And that's where the name Statamic comes from. So it is a modern and actively maintained platform. It's been around for just over 12 years and it's built on top of Laravel since version 3. And because it is built on Laravel, and Laravel ships with Tailwind and Vite, that's what Statamic is set up to do as well. You can also take your own front-end approach. So if you want to be using jQuery, if you want to be using Bootstrap, if you want to be using plain CSS, you can do it your way as well. So Statamic doesn't try to get in the way and make decisions for you. It gives you tools to help you get up and running, but you can then still do it the way that you want to work. When you do get started, everything will just be in flat files. So all of your content is stored in files rather than in a database. But that also means it can be really easy to get up and running among teams. And if you are using the pro version of Statamic, changes that get made to your content on production can also get then pushed back up to Git. So it's easy for you to then get your site up and running again locally. It is incredibly flexible and it's very extensible, and I think that's one of the things that can be a little bit intimidating for newcomers because it does have a lot of freedom with how you approach things, and that can kind of be a bit of a I don't know what to do next situation. So that's what we're going to have a look at today. So if we compare it with other platforms, we know WordPress, we know Joomla, they've got a web-based admin, and that's the same thing here. You can get different add-ons, extensions, components, modules, plugins, whatever you want to call them. They both exist as well. But then there are also some differences too. So to get up and running with Statamic, you do need to be a developer. It's not something that's going to be a one-click install through something like Fantastico and a theme store that you can get plug in and away you go. You will need to do some development work compared to WordPress and Joomla and others where you can get it set up yourself. You don't need to be a dev. It is incredibly open and flexible with how you approach things compared to WordPress and Joomla, where it's a little bit more traditional about here's my page, here's a blank box, I just want to put content in, and you then try to massage your way around there. Statamic's content is all going to be schema-based, and that's really what we're going to be playing around with today compared to WordPress, Joomla, and others that basically have a HTML field and away you go. And this is out of the box. Obviously, there's plugins that you can get for other platforms that can add page builders and ideas like that. But out of the box, Statamic does give you all the tools that you need to build a site. Schema-based content. It is made up of blueprints, just like you'd have a blueprint for your house. Your blueprints are made up of a number of different fields, and these fields are what the authors would see and fill in when they go to edit any of their content within the site. There are over 40 different field types that you're able to get out of the box, whether that's input, text area, select boxes, check boxes, assets, videos, repeater fields, all sorts of different fields are ready for you to use to build sites. And we're going to step through quite a few of them today, and hopefully not too overwhelming for you. But you can also make your own too. So if you do have a field type need, you can actually make your own field types too, which does open up the potential for you to really expand what the platform can do. So blueprints are where all of the editing and authoring interfaces get defined. So this is just taking all those different field types, using them how you need for your authors, and that creates your blueprints. We then also have the idea of field sets, and these are reusable groups of individual fields, and they could be as simple as a single field. Maybe it's a text editor that you configure in a specific way, or it could be a little bit more advanced and be a group of fields that get configured in a specific way. You can either use those individually within your blueprints, or you can even reuse field sets with a different prefix so that you can use them in different ways within the same blueprint as well. For example, if you were to have a field set that defines the content for a column, you could have left column, right column, because you've got your prefix, but it's the same field set, so it can make management a little bit easier. Okay, so let's get into actually having a bit of a play around. We like going to the movies, don't we? Yes, I like going to the movies. Okay, so I thought the best way to try to get your head around how this works is if we actually look at this from a real-world application, so everything makes sense for you. Okay, so on a cinema website, we need to have a list of movies. And that's what we're going to build together today within Statamic. So if we just log into the control panel, how's that for readability? I might just toggle to light mode. There we go. Makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so Statamic stores all of its content in what is called a collection, and each collection can have its own set of blueprints. You can have one, you can have multiple, depending on what your needs are. So in our pages collection, we just have the pages that our site already has, you know, homepage, our movies page, privacy policy, all of those sorts of things. What we need to do now is create a collection where all of our movies will sit. So what we will do is build the pages that are necessary to actually have movie information shown on our website. So we can get started by creating a movies collection and click create collection. That's done half the work for us. Now, when we look at movies, we also need to have them with their own different layouts and templates. They're not going to fit within the same structure. So we can quickly scaffold our views out, and this will create the two files that we will need, and we'll have a play with those as we go through. So it's created those files for us. If we jump over to PHP Storm, under resources and views, we now have this movies folder with index and show. So it's created the files for us, and we're now ready to get up and running. Okay, before we do get into playing around a bit more, I will fly through these. This is very repetitive when you start using it a little bit more, but we will configure our collection, and we will actually create the route to be on the mounting point, and then the slug of the entry itself, and we will mount that on our movies page. Okay, so this is where we can control the template for all the entries in that collection. So that's going to be the show page. You're going to notice this as well. A quick little segue here. You will notice the words that they use and the terminology they use is very Laravel. So if you have a controller to show an entry, it's going to be called show. Similarly, the template here is going to be called show. So you'll find a lot of those things to help keep you in the one headspace. Let's just go and click save there. Okay, so if we go to our movies page and refresh that, we see absolutely nothing because we haven't changed anything yet. Within our pages collection, this is the tricky part just to get up and running. We need to define the movies index page. That's going to be our list of movies. And if we then save this and go back to our page, we see nothing because that file was empty. Okay, so let's just copy over what we did have here into our index page, and you'll see we've got our list of movies. Now, for this demo, I want to make it a little bit wider. This will make it a bit easier for us to see differences that are going on. Okay, there we go, wider page, lovely, good start. So let's go and add a movie. We're just going to add our first movie. So we want to create an entry, and we're going to create a page for Finding Nemo. We're not going to worry about the content for the moment. Let's just click save. And while we're here, let's also create one for a second film. Okay, so we've got our two movies. Good start, but our page still isn't showing anything. So let's just jump back in, and we can quickly write some code that will list out our movies. So Statamic comes with a whole heap of different tags. So we're going to use the collection tag, and we're going to tell it to use the movies collection. And all we want to do here is we're just going to create a list. Oops. And within that, we're going to create a link to our page. So Statamic is going to take our collection, and it's going to loop through. And Statamic will give us these variables, so the URL and the title. Where these names come from, we'll have a look at in just a moment. But if we then go and look at our page, we now have our movies listed. And if you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can very faintly see the route has changed as well on our mounting point. So let's just go to Finding Nemo, and we get another blank page. And that's because our show file, once again, is blank. So let's just copy our base template over into show, and we'll change our width again, and we should now get Finding Nemo. Beautiful. Okay, so with me so far? That's the confusing part, getting up and running. Now's the fun part. Okay, so we've been talking about blueprints and fields. So we now need to change this interface that we're looking at here to actually have fields that are specific for a movie. And this is where blueprints and fields are going to come into play. So if we jump over to our blueprints area, we can see that we've got a blueprint for our movie, and we have a title. See how we've got our handle called title? So that's where Statamic's variable names are coming from. Whatever you have as your handle is what's going to be available within the templating language. Now, we don't actually want to change our title, but we don't need content. we need a synopsis. So we're going to create a field, and here's all of the different fields that we're able to play with. Lots and lots of fields to explore, to create interfaces that are relevant for your users. So for our synopsis, we're just going to use a barred field, and we're going to call it synopsis. There is also validation. I'm just going to talk about this quickly now, but I'm not going to apply any validation just to make it easier to run with. Required, yes or no, as well as all of the different Laravel rules that Laravel comes with, you can hook into. So if you want to make something required, if a different field has a value, you can actually do that within all the validation here. That's a topic for another talk. So we'll, leave that alone. Okay, so if we just go and click save, jump back to our edit interface, we now have synopsis. And because you don't want to see me type, I'm going to use an add-on that just generates some lorem ipsum for us. And if we go back and look at our movie, we're not seeing it because we haven't output anything. So let's jump back over to our template. Okay, create a bit of space, makes it easier to see what's going on. Okay, so we now have this content variable, but remember we called it synopsis? Synopsis. If we go and check it out, there's our synopsis information that's been put out. So that's a fairly straightforward one. Now, movies also have a duration. So let's create another field, and we're going to search for an integer. And we're going to call this running time. But I actually want the handle to be called duration. So that way you can have a label that is more meaningful for your authors, but actually have a more meaningful name for you as the developer internally if you need. Now this is going to be an integer, and we want it to be the number of minutes. So we'll put a suffix on the end. And if we just click save, jump back to our edit interface, we can now see that it's asking us for a running time. So let's just put in 101 and jump back. There'll be nothing to see because there's no variable yet, but if let's just do a running time and output duration and the word minutes, we will now see 101 minutes has been added. So it's all very simple to create fields, give them the handle that you need, and then use them within Antlers, which is the templating engine that Statamic comes with by default. If you're a Blade person, you can also use Blade. Antlers is really easy to use and a little shorter to write than using the Blade equivalent because Statamic comes with a heap of, another little segue, heaps of tags and modifiers that can adjust how variables get processed or any processing that happens on top of a variable, and using those within Antlers is a lot easier. So it's worth checking out, and it's very, very simple. Squiggly brackets and your variable name. Nothing too challenging there. Okay, so we've got a running time. How about a release date? Let's add a release date. We're going to call that release date. We'll just click save, jump back to our edit screen, and we can now add a date as well. So let's just say that's going to come out next week. Click save. If we jump back over to our code, let's just go release date. And we want to output the variable release date. Okay. So we now have the 8th of August. You'll see it's nicely formatted. So these dates are all handled as carbon objects, and we can pass different date formatting strings, and Statamic will have a default, which is what's being applied here. But if we wanted to change the format, we can apply a modifier. So let's apply just a PHP date string. And you can see we've now transformed that date into a format that's more applicable for what we're actually wanting to do. Okay, so date is fun. Now, before we get any further, let's just have a look at this edit screen, and it's getting a little bit hard to use and inconvenient because information is just presented in a very chunky way. So let's just take a moment to have a look at the blueprint editor to see what we can do to make this a little cleaner. So first of all, I'm going to move the synopsis. Oh, wrong button. And we are going to create synopsis. And we're going to drag our synopsis down into this section. And we can even turn off the label. So that way it's not going to be replicating things. So if we just refresh our page, you can see we now have a top section and our synopsis is now in a different section down below. Now I'm not really happy with the running time and release date. I think they're still taking up too much space. So if we make the running time be 33%, we can make our release date be 66. Refresh, and we now are getting a much tighter interface that will be easier for our content authors to use, which is especially important if they're not tech people. And all of the blueprint editing is all capable to be done just through the control panel. So if a new field needs to be added, it is very straightforward to do. Righto, okay. Now we need to add a little bit more. Let's create a new section called media. And I want to drag that up to be above synopsis, and we're going to add an image. Now images are called assets within Statamic. This is going to be our poster. Now we want to make sure that our movie only has one poster, so we want to select one, and we want to link it to our posters folder. Let's go save and apply. Save that, check it out, and we now have this poster field. Okay, but we haven't got any posters yet. So if we go to upload and go to our movies folder, we can select Finding Nemo, and it's now added that image for us, uploaded it to our asset container, and we're good to go. Now, of course, we've saved that, but we're not going to see anything because we haven't output that image yet. So let's have a quick look at our image. Now, images, you're able to use Glide for all of your image processing. There is a lovely component that we've included here, which is handling all of that to make it responsive. We won't go through all of this craziness now, but that's what we would use on a real-world site so that it can be served in WebP and JPEG in different sizes, all on the fly, based on the source image that we're providing. The reason I'm showing this as well is that after this talk, I will also release the source code. So if you did want to have a bit of a look and a play, you can then get up and running from where we started today. Everything's ready to go. So what we can do is I'm just going to copy this line because here's one I presented earlier. Here's one I prepared earlier to output our image. You can see we now have this lovely big image that's being displayed, but it's kind of a bit big and a bit chunky. So let's just take a moment to rearrange things. Div class equals grid, grid cols 4, and we'll also want gap 8. Okay, so we're going to have a div for our poster. So let's just move you over here, and then col span 3, and this is where the rest of our content is going to go. So let's just take our heading and what are we, MT16, and then we're just going to copy the rest of this. Let's get rid of you, paste you in there. Quick and dirty just to make it look a little bit nicer. Now we'll just add some spacing for readability. Cool, okay, so starting to take shape, yeah? Righto, so we've looked at images. We're going to have a quick look at another great field type, and this is video. So obviously we want to have a trailer. So we can just create a new field. It's a type video. Save this, check out our edit screen, and it's looking for a URL. So if I jump across to here, get our URL, paste it in, we can now see our video is presented. Awesome. Now, how do we output that? If we jump over to PHP Storm again, we can then create an iframe with a source of trailer. And Statamic comes with a embed URL modifier, which will translate the YouTube video that a user would select into the embeddable iframe URL. It's a little bit more advanced than that as well, because there are also ways when you might want to have a locally hosted video, which has a different embed process, and Statamic is able to take care of that too. Check the docs, that'll be good for you. We want this to be aspect video, width full, and check that out. And there we go. We now have our video being shown on our page as well. Now that's big and in the way, so I'm just going to move that to the very bottom. Okay, so we've looked at video. Now let's get into some fun, funky stuff. Okay, movies have classifications, and these are going to be the same. In Australia, we've got G, PG, M, MA, and R. We've created a taxonomy here called classifications. So I've pre-prepared this. We've got our G with our badge. And if we just jump to the blueprint for our classification, you can see we have a title, we've got a description, and we have our badge and an order by, which is just to get them in the nice order that makes sense for an Australian audience. So if we jump back over to our movie blueprint, and let's create a field, and we want this to be a taxonomy term. So taxonomies are the collection, taxonomy term is the individual term within. So you could have a taxonomy called tags, and then within your tags taxonomy, you would have terms of things like article, recipe, post, story, whatever tags you're needing, whatever terms you're needing. So we want to hook up to a term. We're going to call this classification. Okay, max items, we only want one. We want it to be a select drop down. We don't want people to create. We want to pick it from classifications, and because here's one I prepared earlier, this is a query scope. Again, more advanced feature, but what this is going to do is tell Statamic to look at the classifications taxonomy and order it by the order by field that I've added to the blueprint. So that way we can get it in the order that we want. We just click save, and we will actually add one more thing, consumer advice. Okay, save. Let's go and edit Finding Nemo. Now, Finding Nemo is rated G. Some scenes may frighten small children. Okay, so this is a fun one. We've now linked to that G classification, so we don't need to upload that G logo every single time we use it. We now want to have that displayed here. So let's jump in. Okie dokie. We'll just create another section, and if we output our classification, you will see that we get nothing, because our classification is now an actual, it's an object. It includes a title, it includes the description, and it includes the badge. So what we need to do is we need to call the specific field that we want within the classification to start outputting information. So we can have our title, we could then have our classification description, and you see we now get general, and we can also have our badge. So let's wrap this again. Classification badge. Okay, so this will be fun. We're getting a URL, which is not really what we want, because we want that to actually be processed as part of our image. So, because this is a nice simple one, let's have a quick look at the glide tag. So we want to create the glide tag, and what we want to do is pass a variable of classification badge, because that's what our URL is. And we want to pass that to glide. What glide will do is we'll return a heap of different parameters that we're able to use within our markup. So within here, we're able to actually create our image, based off of the parameters we get. We're going to get URL, which is what glide will transform our public asset into, so that way it will be served in JPEG or PNG and WebP for backwards compatibility. We'll also get parameters like width and height. And we can also set alt attributes. Now, every asset can have its own alt attribute, but for this instance, I think we can just use our classification title. Okay, we now have our G image. Lovely, easy. So that's just using our glide tag. We could then even make that be size 12, size 12, and we get a nice small little image now as well. And remember, we had our consumer advice. That's the same thing, just outputting the same variable like we have done before. Right, okay, let's keep going with taxonomies, because there's more to talk about here. What about genres? Movies have genres. So how about we go and create a new taxonomy? And we're going to call this taxonomy genres. Easy. Create. And that's all we're going to do for now. If we jump back over to our blueprint for our movie page, we can create a field. We want it to be a taxonomy term again, but we want this to be genres. We want this to come from, we don't want the max items. We want this to be a type ahead. We want people to create genres on the fly, and we want this to come from the genres taxonomy. Let's just click apply, save that. And now we have genres. So Finding Nemo is going to be animation, and it's also going to be family. So we've now created two taxonomies, animation and family. This is now an ordered list as well. And if we jump back over to our taxonomy, you can see it's created those for us as well. So now if we want to rename what animation is, we can rename it in one place, and that can be referenced everywhere within our site. Okay, now we need to loop through this to output those genres. So easy. We've got a genres variable. So that's again based on the handle that we created for our genres. And all we need to do, because we have a title, essentially everything that you create in Statamic will have a title handle. If we just click save, we will then see our two genres have been output. Now, what we're doing here is we're actually looping through an array of items. So for every genre, we are running through this middle line of code. There are a number of other little variables that Statamic will give us. So if it's not last, let's add a comma. And check out that. Now we have animation, comma, family, but we don't have that trailing comma at the very end. So this is showing that we're able to then take repeating information from our blueprint and actually then output that easily via the Antlers templating engine as well. Okay, while we're talking about repeating things, let's get into another fun one. We're going to create a new tab and we're going to call this session times. Now, we don't need a title here, so let's get rid of that. We're going to create a field, and this is called grid. I love grid, and I love replicator. They're very similar in what they do, slight little differences, but grid's giving us a bit more flexibility. We want to create this called session times. Okay, when we add a new row, so when we add a new row to our grid, we want to have a button that says add new date. That way you can actually customize the label to suit your audience's wording. Now, what's special about a grid or a replicator is that you can actually create a number of different fields that will appear in each row. So just for simplicity, we're going to have a date, and we just need that to be called date. And we need a text field. We're going to call that times. We don't want it to be quite so chunky, so how about we change the widths, click apply, save, jump back. And at the very top, you see we now have this session times tab. We jump through here, we've got our add new date button. We can pick our date and say 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. We can add a second date. Let's go for tomorrow, we'll make it 6 p.m. Save and publish. Okay, so now what we've got is we need to loop through every row of our session times and we need to do things to the fields within that. So let's quickly output our session times. Now, it's called session times. That's what we called our grid. So we'll just close that off. And now everything that we do within here is going to be for an individual row that we've just created. So we know we're going to have a date, and we know we're going to have a field called times because they're the handles that we used. So we now have those two fields being output for us. If we don't like that date format again, you could then do pipe format. DJSMY, I think is what I want. Yeah, there we go. So we now have a short name of the day, a short month. Yeah, so we're able to now loop through that grid, making it super easy for an author to come through and add and remove session times without actually needing to do anything too complicated. They can then add a third one, and let's say that's going to be on at 12 noon. Save. Reload our page, and there we go. We've got our third one added as well. So that's just showing how easy it is to actually loop through more advanced structures. We've only got two fields here, but some of the grids and the replicators that we use can actually be full of different field types that gives us a lot more freedom and control with what we're doing. Okay, so we're looking at all these different fields. There's one other thing that I'm going to do, and that's make it look pretty. Here's one I prepared earlier. There we go. So we now have a proper page. You can see we're looping through our session times with a little bit of greater finesse. Our trailer's disappeared, but we've added a little Alpine pop-up to actually show our trailer in a pop-up instead of taking up precious space. If we jump back to movies, we also want to make sure that this page looks a little bit better. So let's copy our poster image that we've created. And instead of the title, let's output our poster image. And we get our image, our movie posters. Oh, we haven't added one for Gravity. Let's go and do that. Let's just upload a new poster. Upload Gravity. Okay, save you. There we go. We now have our jumbo images, but that's not very user-friendly, so very easily we're able to then wrap this and when we go and reload our page, we're then going to see our movies. Again, because I'm organized and have here's one I prepared earlier, we could then even add some nice little hover states to it as well. So all the variables that you have when you're looping through your entries are going to be available for you as well. So if you wanted to output session times at this point, you could do that too, because Statamic has actually loaded those for you. Okay, so we talked about fields, we talked about blueprints. There's one more thing I want to really talk about, and that's going to be called field sets. So remember I mentioned that field sets could either be a single field that you use multiple times, so you configure it once and reuse it, or it could be a set of fields that you want to reuse once in multiple places. I know they sound similar, they're a little different. Within our common fields, we've got a text advanced and a text plain. So we're actually using a configuration for our editor here that we can now link to that field rather than have to configure it every single time we use it. So that's where you would use a single field. What we're going to do though, is we're going to add some metadata. So if we jump back to our homepage, you can see our title at the top is home, because that's just pulling in from Statamic's title. We don't really want that. So what we're going to do is create a new field set called metadata. And our metadata is going to have a title. And our metadata is also going to have a description. And apply, save. Okay, great. So easy so far. It's just like creating another blueprint, but so far it doesn't do anything because we haven't hooked it up anywhere. If we jump over to our pages blueprint, blueprints, page, we can create a new tab called metadata, and we can link a field instead of adding a new field. And I want to link to a field set, and I want to link to the metadata field set. Because we've created two fields, one is title and one is description, we need to prefix those. So if we put a meta in front of it, that means our fields are actually going to be available for us with meta title, meta description. So if we just click link, you can see we've got our field set linked. But if we jump over to our homepage, we have a new metadata tab and a title and our description. Here is my metadata title. Let's click save. And again, nothing has changed to our title yet because we haven't actually hooked it up. So if we go to our layout file, you can see we've got our title being used, and then we're just outputting the site name. Because we now have this variable that may exist called meta title, let's output that first if it exists. Otherwise, we'll just use the page's title. So now here is my metadata title. But if I jump back to movies, you can see that it's just using the movies title because that's all that exists. Current movies at CineSite. Save. There you go, current movies at CineSite. So we can now apply that same field set to our movie blueprint as well. And this is where this gets really important about reusing information, metadata. Confirm, we want to link. We want to link with metadata, and we want meta as our prefix, and click save. So now if we jump to a movie, like Finding Nemo, there's no title. So we're just pulling in Finding Nemo, the best Nemo. Let's add that. And you can see our title is now changed, even though it's in a different collection. But we're now using that one field set. So if the client then turns around and says, oh, I actually need to add a new metadata field, no problem. We can go to our metadata field set, and we could then say, we could create an asset, and it could be for the OG image. Click apply, click save. And now when we go to edit our movie, we now have OG image added. If we go and edit our page, we'll also have OG image added. So we've just had to we have just had to add one field, but now both of our collections are using it because we're using that linked field set instead. So getting your head around the idea of blueprints and fields is the start. Then field sets is about reusability and helping make things more modular and easier for you to actually work with day to day. Rightio, let's jump back in here. So because it is built on top of Laravel, it is built very much using the Laravel way. So if you're following what Laravel recommends, you'll feel right at home with looking at how Statamic works. It keeps you in the Laravel ecosystem. So if you're wanting to hook in with a database for session times, for example, maybe you want to actually pull those from a platform, you can then use the same logic, the same HTTP client that you would normally use for your API calls within Laravel. Because you're in the same ecosystem the whole time. And it can also exist with an existing Laravel app too. So if you've got an app and need content management, you can plop Statamic on top of it and start to actually have the two coexist harmoniously together. You can then extend what it can do as well. Just like a composer package that you would create for Laravel, you can create add-ons for Statamic. They can either live within your site if it's something very unique to you, or it could be something that is distributable for those times when you want to sell it on the marketplace or release it as open source that anyone is able to use. And just like Laravel has Artisan, the Artisan command, Statamic, you just need to say please. So PHP please make add-on, and it will step you through the information needed to create your add-on. So yes, it's a content management system, but it's also so much more than that as well. So within Australia, there is a meetup that we do. Our next one's going to be on the 15th of August. They're all online because we are crossing over New Zealand and Australia, getting everyone to catch up online. If you'd like to join in, you can scan that QR code for more information. Documentation is a fantastic place to start, and the community for Statamic is on Discord. So if you do want to get involved, Discord is a great place to be, especially because if you're a late night person, Statamic is very international, and you can wake up and open Discord and see swarms of messages that have happened overnight. There's also a course on Laracast from Jack, who is the creator and founder of Statamic. So if you do want to get up and running quickly and you're on Laracast, give that a go as well. And if you do have any other queries, you can find me on my website. I'm from Mighty Digital as well. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention today. Does anyone have any queries?